Hello, hello, good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning to every one of our Church of the Nazarene members, friends. This is the Gospel Magazine brought to you by the Church of the Nazarene, Trinidad and Tobago. It's Wednesday. It's a beautiful, warm Wednesday this morning. Unlike yesterday when we had such a heavy downpour, wow, it really was really heavy here and for the last 2 days, but today the weather has cleared up nicely. The sun is shining, and we thank God for the sun shining in our lives. But we also thank God for His Son who continues to shine. Amen. We thank God for His Son who continues to shine. Amen. To God be the glory. I want to say special good morning to our new district superintendent, my friend, my brother, Reverend Ryan Williams. He's up and running and off to a good start, assuming office a couple of days ago. And I know your plate is full, brother, so my prayers are with you. Good morning to the zonal superintendents. We have the return of Reverend Hargraves in the north, but we have some new ones. If I could remember the names, down in south, we have a new one from the Cochrane Nazarene Church. Why does his name elude me? I don't know. I have so much material in my head to share. And we have a new one in the East as well, because the former East superintendent is now the district superintendent. And of course, in Tobago, we have Reverend George. So, good morning to you, illustrious gentlemen. Good morning to all of the churches logged on. And just by way of reminder, I understand from some calls and some messages that were sent that some people are unable to log on. Right now, we don't have any viewers logged on. I'm not sure if there is an issue, but I was told by my tech people to tell the audience that log in on Facebook, and from your Facebook account, it's easier to log into the Gospel Magazine. Okay? If you're having trouble getting on through Facebook, I suggest you try um, YouTube, because I was told that sometimes YouTube is easier. So if you're not getting on Facebook and it's a struggle, go via YouTube and you will see the broadcast and you can participate from there. But again, if you want to comment, if you want to write in a comment in the chat, you will have to you must log in, and the software will allow your comment to be seen and I can respond, because I'm really, really happy when I see comments in the chat. I'm really happy, and I'm really happy to respond also. Okay, so there's no one now, but I will continue because we would not wait. All right. This morning, we continue the conversation on child abuse. We continue the conversation on child abuse and violence against women and incest. Okay? Because it is one of those troubling subjects that we sometimes like to not deal with because it's very uncomfortable. And that is understandable. Because as a parent, your stomach churns when you hear of a child abused sexually, when you have a child abused any kind of way. Okay? And we have not, as community people, as Christian leaders, we have not given it enough attention. We have not given enough urgent attention. And so we are losing our children. We are losing our children. So I want to be a strong advocate for child care. I want to be a strong advocate against child abuse. I want to be a strong advocate against violence against women. Amen. Because I think part of it is the responsibility of the church, and not everyone can do it, but I will do it. I will do it because I think it's absolutely necessary. Okay, so we'll be talking about child abuse, and in studio with me this morning is Mrs. Shakila Adams Joseph. She's a graduate of the Caribbean Nazarene College. So, hurrah to kudos to the Nazarene College right here in Trinidad. Produced a fine young lady. And from time to time, I will be using our graduates to promote them and hear what they are doing since they have graduated, and to give them an opportunity to participate in these national conversations, because it is very, very appropriate. And we need to hear from all of these people because we want to find a way to stem the tide of violence and abuse against our dear children and the women in our nation. Amen. So, Shakila, good morning.
Good morning, Reverend Isaacs. Thanks for
Good.
having me again. It's a
Am-
privilege here.
Amen. Before we start, I want to just give some definitions. Um, I'm taking this from a document from the Rape Crisis Center, and it gives a definition of child abuse, because sometimes we use the term and we think of child abuse in one way only. Okay,
Mm.
I want to give the what I think is an excellent definition, so it could inform you as we go along in this conversation. All right. Child abuse is any act or inaction on the part of a parent or caregiver which results in the neglect, physical and or emotional harm, sexual abuse, or sexual exploitation of a child. Let me read it again a little quicker. Child abuse is any act or inaction on the part of a parent or caregiver which results in the neglect, physical and or emotional harm, sexual abuse and or sexual exploitation of a child. I think this is a simple definition, but it's very succinct and it's very clear. So when we hear about child abuse, it's not only the physical act of inflicting harm, but simply not doing anything, leaving the child locked up in home while you go down the road or whatever, and something happens, you are guilty of child abuse. Not preparing adequately for the safety of your child, making sure there is somebody to look out for your child when you have to run an errand or whatever, and you leave the child unattended and something happens. It may not always be physical. Sometimes the fear of being alone causes significant trauma. That is child abuse, because you have allowed the child to come into a situation where their fear overwhelms them and causes stress and causes a bit of trauma. Okay? So abuse could be physical, you know, punching, beating, kicking. Abuse also could be emotional. And this is the part a lot of us do not see. Child abuse could be emotional, constant and repeated acts of verbal insults. Oh, you're no good, you're so this and that. Or cruel punishment, such as locking in closets or locking in some room where it's dark and that kind of thing. That is cruel punishment. That is child abuse. So I want to clarify and broaden your imagination to understand what really is child abuse when we enter this conversation. Sexual abuse, inappropriate touching. Notice I didn't even talk about penetration yet. Inappropriate touching is sexual abuse. Okay, it's part of child abuse. And fondling of genitals and sexual intercourse with a child, exposure to pornography or taking pornographic pictures or videos. All of that is sexual violence. You are sexually abusing a child when you engage in any one of these actions. Touching, fondling of genitals, sexual intercourse, which we tend to think is the only form, but also taking pornographic pictures. That is sexual abuse. Okay. And lastly, neglect. Okay. Failing to provide for a child's basic health, nutritional, and educational needs. absence of love and affection. Let me say this again because we may miss it. Failure to provide for a child's basic health. So you leave the child without food, drink for days on end. That is abuse. That is abuse. You do not allow the child to access proper nutrition for their own natural, normal human development. Okay? Failing to have them access the education that they need. That is abuse because the law provides, the state provides rather, schools across the nation for the education of all the children. The law says you must send them to school by the time they reach age 5. Okay, they must be enrolled in a primary school. I think it's gone to age 6 now, but anyhow, you must enroll your child in a school, barring some major illness or something like that. Okay, preschool is good, but it is not mandatory. Okay, preschool is good. Let me say it is very good, but it is not mandatory. But it helps in a significant way. So you have the option of starting off your child in preschool, getting them into an environment, a social environment to prepare them for primary school. And that is the major role of preschool, is not to fill their head with information and data as if they're studying for exam, but to prepare them socially, to learn to interact with children their own age, to learn to say please and thank you, and to learn to raise their hand and say, listen, miss or auntie, I want to use the bathroom, where they are toilet trained and those simple things, buttoning up their shirt and taking care of themselves. All of those are these little things that they need to know and understand and appreciate before they enter primary school. That will make it so much easier for the standard one, for the infant one teacher to work with the child in the next how many years. Okay. um, Threatening the child, name calling, humiliating the child, telling the child that she is no good or he is no good, yelling and shouting, ignoring. All of these are types of abuse. Okay, and the list goes on. I will have it posted in my on the Facebook chat, but we will talk about it as we go along. But let me bring Mrs. Adams Joseph into the conversation. Remember last week we had our licensed social worker coming out of Atlanta, and she brought her perspective as an older, experienced social worker in the States. So she had some very good insights for us. Okay. And maybe in the future we will join Miss Bernard again. But Shakila,
Yes, sir.
um, child abuse. It's one of
Oh,
those sore topics, and sometimes we are afraid to deal with it. Why do we feel this way? Why do we operate this way?
I think there's a fair one to deal with it because we don't want to really deal with the consequences of it. Um,
Okay.
Sometimes because when we do find out about child abuse, especially if it's within the family context,
Yes.
we begin to think about what will happen to this person. What they did was wrong, but I don't want them to go to jail, and what's going to happen
Hmm.
to the family, and especially if they're the breadwinner and all these things. We begin to in our minds begin to say, well, this would happen, and I think their life would be worse off if I report this person.
That's correct.
But the truth is, this individual needs intervention, and we have several things that we can do. You have the police, you have different social, the government provides different place agencies is the word I'm looking for that can help us to deal with those issues, and it has to be addressed because sometimes these things escalate and they move into other areas, and we think the physical abuse or the sexual abuse is the one that we need to look out for. And so if it's not that, we don't think it's as bad. And as you mentioned, there's several types of abuse. And so you have the physical, the emotional, the sexual as well. And so these things impact the individual, they impact the child and how they function. And if we want them to be individuals who grow up to be functioning in our society on a level that we think is productive, we have to address child abuse. Now, one of the things that you have mentioned on the flyer is culture. How does culture affect this? And as West Indians, we grew up in a culture where it's okay to give corporal punishment. And we have to understand the line between corporal punishment and abuse, right? In our local context, I'm not sure if there's a clear definition or demarcation, or some people step over that line a lot. Um, yes, while some may advocate for corporal punishment, you must understand that the child should not be leaving that situation where you believe you would have administered discipline, especially where it's physical, that they're leaving with some bruise that is going to be there for days. Or they're leaving, they can't even get up off of the floor when you're finished. They cannot attend school. They can't eat. They get sick. They may get a fever because your administration of this corporal punishment that beat them because they did whatever in your mind was some infraction, whatever it was. And I'm not saying discipline is not important, but you have to understand this line between discipline and abuse, right? And I think that is a issue. So while we say we grew up, I get licks and I didn't die. And you hear a lot of people say that. Licks never kill me. It never killed nobody. And that's why this generation is the way it is. Because now y'all have taken away this and y'all say you're not beating your children. And this is why. You can discipline. And there are other ways in which you can discipline. And I think that is the key. If we begin to teach, to educate, and to tell people there are other things that you can do. You can have time out. You can sit in a chair. You can take away something for a while on explaining, I'm doing this because you have done X, Y, and Z, you know, and talk to children and help them to understand their role, their expectation, and how they function within that particular setting. And I think most times, that aspect is overlooked because we think they're children. They must do what I tell them to do. They have to do it because I say so. I don't have to explain anything to them. And that is usually an issue that we come across because we're coming from the old school. I say so, so do it because I said so. And that is an issue that we have.
Amen. Amen. I just want to, are you hearing me,
Yes,
Shakila?
I am. Yes,
Yeah,
I am.
I had a little tech problem here. I just want to go back to something you said, reporting to the police.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is so very important. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because you also said about the home, the significant person in the home, maybe
Mm-hmm.
the breadwinner who may have been the person doing the
Abuse.
abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yes, and we tend to protect them, but we have to understand that we have to weigh a couple realities. One is, yes, if the breadwinner is taken by the police, taken away by the police because of this act of abuse, um, the home is going to suffer in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the other reality is the child cannot continue to be assaulted and continue the abuse because that child's life would be significantly damaged because of this continued exposure and this continued um, abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand clearly why we do that. But the truth is, we must find a way to go and report to the police. Okay?
Yes.
It may mean um, asking help from maybe someone, your pastor, a social worker, or somebody else to
A
help you.
teacher
Yeah, a teacher,
who normally
and
refer to the social worker in the school
who
because
will
we have those
find
systems.
who will
Mm-hmm.
connect with the social worker much easier. So you find a way to get help so you can do the right thing, because
Yes.
your main goal must be the care and protection of the child. Yes, you would suffer if the breadwinner is taken away, but you have to really weigh against the reality that a child's life, who was now starting out, is
Yes.
in danger, and that is what we must do. So you go to the police, maybe with the assistance of a social worker, the styles teacher, or someone who is much more experienced, and you tell the whole truth without omitting details. And when you do that, they can then begin to assess the situation, do their proper recording, and begin an intervention. Okay?
Yes, definitely.
That is what we need to understand, because um, again, I want to reference something you talk about. Historically and culturally, we have always said, well, I get licks when I was a little boy, and it never killed me.
And
My
I,
father, anything killed me. And we say, well, listen, look, I come out good, I have a good job, and all that kind of. Yes,
mm,
that is true. But
your audio is off. I'm not hearing you.
I'm good now.
Yes, you are. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Um, 2022 requires a different kind of a thinking. Um, our world has changed so much. It has changed even more because of COVID. But a lot of times we justify physical punishment because the Bible says, spare
Fear
not the
not
rod,
the rod.
and we say, well, if the Bible says use the rod, because spare not the rod means use the rod, then I have to use the rod. And we pick up anything from broomstick to pot spoon to chair handle to whatever, and we start to inflict physical harm. That is abuse. But
Hmm.
I want to share something with our audience, our listeners. I want to put up 2022 perspective on the rod. This is my take, and I want you to listen carefully. The rod represents discipline. Okay, in 2022, it represents discipline. It does not necessarily represent a physical object to inflict harm, but it represents discipline. So, sparing discipline will harm the child. In other words, the child, in their very normal way, will do things sometimes out of ignorance, out of just exuberance, and in
Hmm.
their own childish ways, do things that will upset you, will cause maybe damage up some glassware, some ornament, or make a mess. And you need to teach your child, listen, there are some things, this is not the way to do this. This is not the way to do that. You need to find ways, creative ways to teach discipline. Discipline would not come from the end of a stick.
Mm.
Okay? Let discipline come from careful and loving interaction. Let me say it again. Let discipline come from careful and loving interaction. So, as an adult, 6 feet or more, or 5 feet plus more, 5 feet and taller, the child is just maybe 2 feet, if so much. Get down to their level and talk in a tone that would not bring fear. And
Mm.
you say to them, my dear, or little Johnny, little Mary, little Susie, or whatever fancy name they have, um, this is not right.
Right.
Let me help you clean it up. And you smile while you're talking to the child about this mess you're going to clean up. So the child doesn't see, smell, or get a sense of fear. They're hearing concern from auntie, from mommy, from granny, from whoever. They're hearing concern, they're hearing love. So that the correction comes from that place, a loving, caring attention. So when they hear that, they can most likely or more likely respond because mommy is demonstrating love to me. Mommy wants me to clean up this stuff. And
Mm.
that is just one way. If we feel so angry or frustrated by whatever the child has done, we can press our own pause button in our mind before we intervene. Because at this point in time, your favorite jar might be broken or whatever, your bottle of something you just buy broken, and you are upset. My recommendation is pause a few minutes, maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes, you know, turn your back on it and just compose yourself. Okay? Do not engage the child with your anger. The anger will make that child retrieve into a defensive posture and they would not really hear you because they will see you, the adult, coming at them with angry tones and noises that bring fear in their hearts and their minds. They cannot respond.
Mm,
They cannot respond. So, whatever you do in that mode will not do any good at all to you or to the child. So, understand that the rod represents discipline, but the discipline must come from a position, from a place of love and care. That way the child can say, okay, mommy, or okay, auntie, and respond with you and say, let me help you pick up the whatever the break or the pick or the throw down or whatever. So we have to learn this new thinking so that these little things, as the child grows older, you can find more creative ways to impose or to teach discipline. Because remember, what you're doing, you are shaping the life of the child to prepare them for the world outside of your home, whether it's school or church or the community or as they get older for their job. You are preparing this little child to become an older child, to become a teenager, to become a young adult. That is what you are doing.
mhm,
So just as in just as in baking a cake, let's say, I could use a reference. You have to break a couple eggs to make the cake. But you gently work in and combine the ingredients gently so that at the end of the process you have your cake well formed in your oven, beautifully shaped, attractive, and tasty. So your discipline process
mm,
is like forming bread or making cake. You know, you tend to it gently, you know, in the heat of the oven. But at the end of the day, what you have, your main goal is to have this beautiful cake on your table, nicely decorated, or this beautiful loaf of bread or loaves of bread, so that we can all enjoy it. So your child can come out at age 10 or 11 or 12, entering secondary school, feeling so calm, feeling so confident that the new school environment doesn't threaten them. They leave secondary school confident. They enter university expecting challenges but comfortable to face it,
mm.
you know? And that is the kind of a thinking we must engage as we deal with our children or those in charge of us. So when we are frustrated or fatigued or whatever, hold back, back, take time off, even if it's 10, 20 seconds, you know, and just, give yourself a chance to compose and then re-engage the child. Okay, so the rod is not necessarily a physical object to do harm. Okay, I think that is, excuse me, that is very, very important.
So it's interesting that
Yes.
you mentioned that, Rod, and one of the things that you have mentioned here is poverty or financial loss. And so I can already hear, some person who's listening saying, you saying about smile. But imagine this is the last jam we had, and this was the jam that we were supposed to use for the next 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
Because we are already seeing, because these are some of the precursors or some of the risk factors that lead to child abuse.
True.
Um, Poverty, we're already seeing
That's
that.
yeah, yeah.
If the
True.
parent is not as educated, and I'm
True.
no, by no means saying that an uneducated parent cannot parent, because we've seen that with our four parents. All right.
Yes,
So
yes, of
we're
course. So
just
the
saying these
education is
are
not all the degrees.
no, and we know child abuse is across all the spectrum, just like
Hmm.
other abuse. All right. But we're just saying this may put you in a category that you're more at risk for it
Yes.
happening. All right.
Yes.
And so imagine these things, and especially if you're already in a setting where there's poverty or in a community affected by it, these increase your risk factors. So this jam, this is the last jam. All of us are
Mhm.
going to eat from this. You gonna break my jam? It's so you hear a lot. So what parents also need to assess for is the a level of frustration. Why am I so upset that this particular jam is broken? Because granted, if you had the finance, or if you had another bottle or two of jam, it would be bad, but not so bad. You could smile and
Yes,
say, "Oh
that's
gosh,
correct.
Johnny boy." But when you're studying, I have this jam for us to eat for the next 2 weeks. We have nothing else. This is what you're going to eat.
Hmm.
The frustration level is there, and a lot of it, it's steeped, is rooted in the frustration of poverty. And I remember some
Yes.
years ago hearing a grandmother explain to her child, and I was reflecting, oh gosh, mommy, you used to beat a lot when we were little, eh? Because we go through that, we're West Indians.
The,
And she said, you think I beat you all because I wanted to beat you all? She said, no, it was a frustration sometimes, just trying, thinking about all that you have to do. I mean, older now, wiser now, she's able to reflect and say, and added to that, she was a young mother and a single parent of five. So these are some of the things we have to look at, and if we as the church are going to address it, we are going to have to target and put ourselves in place to educate people so they can understand the process.
very much so. Very much so. Good morning to Lisselle, one of our listeners. Very happy to have you on board.
Morning.
Um, what you're saying there is so very true. But also to what also happened in those times, and I can recall conversations with my mother from many, many, many years ago. Um, Poverty drives a certain behavior,
Mm-hmm.
but I think even in your state of lack, you must have some kind of a creativity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that I think is important because I remember I did not come from a wealthy family, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother was creative. So there was jam, yes, that she made. We didn't. She
Made.
didn't buy jam. She made it, you
Okay.
know. And there were these other things. But when there was little, um, we go in the backyard and we play games and we do our own quote unquote hunting and we picking up whatever fruits, you know, and we make a big thing about it and we sit down and eat some mangoes or
Mm,
guavas or whatever. And it was a fun activity. It's only after that I realized, listen, she was just marking time because everybody was hungry and she had nothing else, you know, and hoping that something will turn up.
yes,
You know, invariably my father would have probably come later on with something, you know. But I think we have to be creative.
that's
The
right.
other thing is we have to put away our pride sometimes.
Mm,
We have to put away our pride. You know, this is what neighbors are for. Okay? This is what neighbors are for. Not just to receive when you have a need, but neighbors would send over something. You know, I saw my mother bake bread for the family and
mm,
bag up one or two and send to the neighbor
yeah, that's
without
yeah.
asking a question.
Mm-hmm.
And when neighbor baking her bread or bake or whatever, she send over some. So there's always an exchange of whatever homemade stuff was made. You know, Saturdays, we had a couple of coconut trees. My brother climbed the coconut tree and we make ice cream and bread and that kind of thing. And that was a family outing, but it also was a treat for the all the training community. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone in the community in that little street, we exchanged, you know, our parents exchanged stuff. So that if there was a lack, you had no problem. You felt very comfortable to run over my neighbor and say, Tanti, Auntie, Ma, whatever, you know, I'm hungry. And there was no shame in, you know, and your neighbor give you a bread and butter, bread and jam, or whatever she had. And we lived together in community. I
Ah.
think when the community is speaking into the lives of members of the community,
Mm-hmm.
it eases the burden of poverty. It eases the
Mm-hmm.
burden of lack.
That's
You know,
right.
it eases the burden of not knowing what to do. you know Sometimes as an older parent, or an older grandparent, you see your neighbor, the young parent, struggling with the child. You take a walk over and intervene, and you say, child, how it going, your new baby, let me help and
Mm.
you start a conversation. But that conversation really is the easy frustration you saw on the lady while she's pinning diapers. In those days, we didn't have disposable diapers to just throw away, and it was diapers you wash and you hang up. So you engage in a conversation. Let me help you now, and so the relationship continued to build because the older parent would look and have those significant conversations and that kind of thing. I think we need to go back to those kinds of times when we were not afraid to have conversation with our neighbors, when we're not afraid to share and to help our neighbors. You know, those are the kinds of engagements in 2022 we must have, or we must instill, you know, and it will go a long way in preventing violence against a child. It will go a long way in telling this young parent,
Your audio has gone again. Sorry.
yeah,
Yes, you're back. Mm. Oh,
Mike doing that.
I'm not sure. It's cutting in and out. Check it again.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hold my mouse so it doesn't move at all at all. Yeah, because I remember before I started this child abuse session, we did a session on, or two sessions rather, on marriage and long-term relationships is not for children. You know, I think sometimes or too often our young people get involved too early
Mm.
without being prepared for the demands of long-term relationships like marriage and having
Mm-hmm.
children. you know. But that aside, if we could build and engender a greater community spirit, it will go a long way to having our children grow up in an environment that is safe and very happy. You know, I love to talk about my own childhood because in our street, we, 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 the street was like a large playground for everybody. So like Saturdays, you have 15 children in the street playing, whether it's playing pitch or riding or playing football or whatever, but you have everybody in the street playing together. And that gave the parents time to see
Mm-hmm.
about house and whatever. That gave the parents time to go to market and come back home because there were so many other older children and older adults around to look out. So these are the kinds of things we must have. But when we enter our society, to some extent, has created an illusion by the movies and the videos that we see. We see these beautiful pictures, a really magnificent wedding scene in a church filled with flowers, beautiful music, and all of that. And they walk down the aisle and they sing beautiful songs, and the minister prays for them and blesses them. And then next thing you know, they live in happily ever after. But in between the two, nobody tells them about pregnancy. Nobody tells them about the delivery. Nobody tells them about starting the child off, in those years from birth to 3 years old and all of the issues that comes with it. They weren't trained. They haven't been
Mm-hmm.
exposed. They know nothing about all of these little issues. So when you enter into marriage, simply because you took a chance and the young lady gets pregnant and you decide to marry them off, you're putting them in a challenging place, you know?
And I like how you said that because one of the risk factors for child abuse, just by being a child from 0 to 4, you're already at risk. And
That's
and
correct.
you know I could imagine one of the reasons you're at risk because you're at home most of the time. You're in your
Yes.
parents' care. After that, you turn 5 or some schools accept you a little earlier, and
Hmm.
you're not there as much. But as you
True.
said, some parents are not adequately prepared, and we don't have the support structures in
That's
place.
correct. That's correct.
And
That's correct.
there's some things that are ingrained culturally, and so we replicate them, we see them, we do them, and we
Over and
think
over.
it's okay. But then we're replicating the patterns in a different season and environment that may not facilitate that
That's
same
correct.
thing there.
That's
So
correct.
where
That's
you
correct.
mentioned your neighbor looking out, no, I'm not sending my child nowhere, I'm not doing this because
True. True.
and it's
There's that
sometimes based
trust.
on people's experience. When I used to tell
Yes,
mommy,
that's true.
uncle
Yeah.
touching me, all of us in
Yes.
one room,
Yeah. Yeah.
sleeping.
So, and that's the track. So, on the one hand, it sounds good, but to be honest, you raise a very important point. You know, um, I remember working in primary schools as a guidance counselor. One of the things we would tell the children is, listen, inappropriate touching and
Mm,
what it looks like, and to know to avoid it, and if it happens, to know to report it. So yes, I love to talk about community, but the reality is there are risk factors today. There may be pedophiles in our community. There may be a host of people who are predisposed to taking advantage of children. But so that is real, you know.
yeah, we have to use wisdom. And even in
We
a
have
culture
to be
where
wise.
older folks and growing up, people used to come and pinch you, fat let me squeeze you, and they pinch,
Yes,
or
yeah,
let me get
yeah,
a little
yeah, yeah,
punch. And as you
yeah.
said, but and somebody said,
That is
but that ain't
abuse.
nothing. I grew up that you
Yeah,
get like a pinch on your butt, and you say, but I
yeah,
feel
that's abuse.
uncomfortable. I don't like
Yeah.
it. And he said,
Mhm.
but y'all young people these days, but it's not, we are
True, true,
bordering
true.
into that area, and we need to
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's where we come back to. You need to
yeah.
understand the child is an individual who has rights as well. And because of these
Yes.
other factors, we have to look and say, okay, I know, Granny, we're accustomed. I know you grew up with that, it was okay, but no. And you have a nice conversation. And I don't mean what I'm not
Yes,
saying you're
true.
doing, but I want little Johnny or little Mary or Sarah or whoever to feel comfortable when they
Yeah,
engage with this person. And I remember
yeah,
one of my
that's true.
colleagues saying to me, imagine this is a issue of incest in the family. And so one person decided, they're talking out about it. And another family member say, what is your problem? We all went through that. So in their family, it became a
It's okay.
norm.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
it
okay.
became a norm for them. And these are some of
Yes.
the things that we need to educate, as you say, to understand what is the boundaries that we have in place and even how we speak. You don't see what? You
Mm-hmm.
see this
Mm-hmm.
SEA, CXC, CAPE. One of the things we have been praying about is for, children not to think that, hey, I have to take my life because mommy or daddy or whoever. If you I'll beat you till, if you ain't do that, I go. And, we said it because we went through
Yeah.
that. And,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
you again are abusing the child emotionally.
True, true.
The
Emotional
fear.
abuse. That's
Yes, that
correct. That's
trauma.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So a lot of the things, while I'm advocating, we draw from previous our history, some good elements. The reality is that in some cases it brings risk factors, so it really demands some wisdom.
balance.
Okay. Um,
Hmm.
so you talk about the inappropriate touch, and that comes or is a precursor to incest. You know, the thing is, incest, it happens across the board. It is not
Hmm.
limited to one cultural social group only. It happens
Yes.
across the board, but it is caused by different factors, and it looks differently in different social contexts. You know,
Hmm.
some some societies, some ethnic groups think it's normal. I
Hmm.
remember um, working in a community, and it was expected. And two old men talking, saying the young girl, she reached her age, so I have to taste it first. Meaning I must have sex with her first, because I bring her into the world. And he's talking about his own daughter, you know,
Mm.
and the other guy is saying, yeah, with a nod of approval, so that when we talk about these things, as social workers,
Mm-hmm.
from the context of psychotherapy and bringing intervention, we challenge social norms
Mm-hmm.
in specific communities. So what we say would sound confusing in some people's ears because that's normal,
Yes.
you know. And but
Mm-hmm.
the truth is, it is
It is
not
not.
acceptable. It is not legal. You are
Mm-hmm.
actually bringing harm to the child, you
That's
know.
right.
And those are the realities that we must bear in mind. Okay, some people, in fact, they actually invite and they look forward to when the adult parent would do that, you know, as a sign of an initiation into adulthood.
Mm.
So we have all of these um, culturally acceptable behaviors, but it
Mm-hmm.
is still wrong, it is still illegal, and it affects the child very negatively and for a long time.
That's
So
right.
as parents, as leaders, we have to teach. And that's why I'm saying, listen, I want to, over the next however long, advocate about these things. But I am not about pointing fingers rather, at government, at any national system or whatever. I want to do it by teaching, raising the awareness level,
Awareness. Mm-hmm.
because I do think when you educate people about these little things, you give them an opportunity to make a different choice.
That's right.
Because some people operate out of limited intelligence or awareness, and they make choices out of limited awareness. And so they do not even know that it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So that cultural dynamic needs to shift to include more awareness so that when our younger generation start a family, they must be able to say, they, we are not going to do like our forefathers did, you know, because it
Mm-hmm.
is not healthy, and you see the result because you see the result when you visit um, the prisons and when you visit the homes, okay? People who are abused end up becoming abusers themselves, you
Mm-hmm.
know? People who are abused end up becoming abusers themselves. So it's important that we stop this thing,
The
we
cycle.
or at least stem the flow, stem the tide, because we cannot prevent every single one. But what we can do, we can start to build some dams, some breaches to prevent the flow. So some people will hear and most likely respond, and hopefully at the end of the day they will pass on the message and pass on so that there's a flow downwards and across communities where this information or this truth, this reality comes home strongly to our communities, our young people and our homes and our communities. Because if that does not happen, we have over the last few weeks, we have been bombarded with the news of the old Sabda report, 20 plus years old, and the very
Yes.
recent Judith Jones report of just
Mm-hmm.
a few weeks, that significant level of abuse in these homes,
Homes.
you know
Imagine.
that is sad, where a child is placed for care, but they are being abused, and for a number of different reasons. We have to speak to these situations. We have to encourage, and we have to teach, so that people must know there are certain standards for a home. For a home to be licensed, there must be certain
Mm-hmm.
standards of care. There must be certain standards of preparation for the workers and the managers of these homes. Because once we continue to push that, you know, it means that we are more likely to see more attention being paid to the staffing of these institutes, you know, and not just staffing at the beginning, but continual training and continual exposure to truth and the proper ways of doing things. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we are faced, we live in a culture where so much wrongdoing has been normalized and become acceptable. And what we see manifesting from that is high levels of crime,
Yes.
across the board,
It's all
and we
interconnected.
it's all interconnected. That's right. And if we don't see the connection and
Mm-hmm.
start to make intervention, because this is what we are about here, intervention through
Mm-hmm.
education, I think we'll be in for some really difficult and challenging times. Yes, we have the police. We talk about reporting with the police, but we have social workers in the schools, school social workers.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there's not enough, I must say, we have guidance counselors, even though we don't have enough. We have social workers in different ministries, medical social workers, and a host of other social workers across
Yes.
the board. We have people in charge. My recommendation as we go forward, yes, I am understanding, not accepting, I am understanding that we are short staffed in terms of putting of employing social workers, of employing guidance counselors, of employing
Mm-hmm.
all these helping people. But while that is there because of economics, I think we must look at collaboration, you know, so that while the resources are limited, if there's collaboration across the board by all of these agencies and less red tape, you know, so that help could come to the children who are abused, help could come to the children who have these specific needs, I think we can have a much more positive atmosphere, especially when it comes to our children.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel we must not throw up our hands in despair and say that, okay, our school system needs 150 new social workers. We can't afford to pay that amount of staff increase. We need a next 150 of this and that and the other. So to staff 1,000 new people across the board at the present rate, we don't have the money. That might be so, but that must not stop us from thinking and from assuming different positions where you can say, listen, how can I help?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
How can we
maybe
bridge the gap?
how can we bridge the gap? Yes, maybe look at those non-profit organizations, and
Mm-hmm.
you can say, listen, they have, like churches, for instance, or football clubs, and all these other large social groups. Um, find ways to connect with them. So when a group comes together to start training, you can get a 10 minutes and start to talk about these issues and teach, you know, and make yourselves available, or maybe even the football coach, netball coach, the cricket coach, whatever, might be interested to say, listen, one of my young people, one of these people in the group has an issue. And so you start a conversation
Mm-hmm.
and you give that person tools. So now that person becomes an extension of you. But that person is already paid in a job, whatever. But that person now has some new skills to help those who are within his or her care, whether it's netball or cricket or whatever. Same thing in the church. Church has a lot of people coming into their spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Connect with them, give them some skills, show them, so that they can help the younger members within their church community, and so we could continue to add and keep adding to the range and the number of helpers in our society. Amen. This is, I think, very, very, very important now. And um, while the Minister of Finance will say one thing, funds limited or whatever, while the Prime Minister will say one thing, we as helpers, we could collaborate and we could find ways of what I think um, what I think is very, very necessary to stem the tide of abuse and and incest among our community. Um, so our time is coming close to an end. I put up the poster here, Shakila.
Hmm.
Give me your closing words, because I want to have this up here as we close up.
As we are coming to an end, I just would like to give some of the agencies that we have available that you can reach out to. So if you're
Very well.
hearing this broadcast and you'd like to reach out, and I mean, this day and age, I mean, a lot of people, so I don't have the numbers, but I can give you the name. So off the top, you have the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and this is both in Trinidad and Tobago. You can
That's correct.
access them. So Children's Authority, you have the Child Guidance Clinic, you have the National Family Services, you have the Children Welfare League of Trinidad and Tobago, you
That's
have the
correct.
Ministry of Social Development and Family Services,
That's
and you
correct.
have the Child Rights Ambassador, and you also have the Organization for Abused and Battered Individuals. All right, so that covers a
Mhm.
gambit of people.
A lot, a lot, a lot. And
Yes,
you have
because
what you have left out in the CPU, the child protection unit, the police,
of the,
and
yes, I was going to leave that for
the
last, but go ahead. Go ahead, go
and the
ahead.
witness protection, not witness protection, but there's another unit within the police that speaks to and provides help. Okay, so that there's a number of agencies. What I would like for you to do, Shakila, um, put this list together, put some numbers together, and I'll put it on the Facebook page of the Gospel Magazine. And we'll
Okay.
try to promote it from your end and my end as well, because people need to know there is help out there.
Hmm.
Okay? There is help out there. You need not suffer in silence. You need not stop and watch your child suffer in silence, but we can get the help for our children. So, Shakila, thank you again.
Yes.
I really appreciate the time you have given to us and your time of service and sacrifice. And I trust that as you continue into your own work as a counselor, you will continue to grow and be blessed. That God will just multiply your intake,
Thank
and
you.
you will continue to be a blessing to people, to communities, and to our nation. So, folks, this is the one more time we are out of time. And this has been the Gospel Magazine brought to you by the Trinidad and Tobago Church of the Nazarene. And we want to just wish you a blessed and a happy Wednesday and continue to enjoy the day. Amen. God bless
Amen.
you all.
God bless. Bye.